All right, welcome to the show. My guest today is Angie Sanchez. She is a health and lifestyle coach based in Miami, Florida. Angie has had a number of challenges and setbacks she's had to overcome, including working in an unfulfilling career, a life-threatening car accident, clinical depression, and also an eating disorder. She says she knows firsthand what it's like to feel unconventional, lost, stuck, depressed, not knowing your potential, or the tools that are necessary for growth and change. Because she was in this position herself, it's become her mission to help provide these tools to clients, help them overcome their own challenges and reach their potential. I wanted to bring Angie on the show to discuss how she overcame her own challenges, what she learned from them, how she built up her coaching business, and how exactly she helps her clients reach their potential. So Angie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
You're very welcome. So I thought an interesting place to start would be a bit of your background and your story, because from what I researched on you, it sounds like 2014 was kind of the point where you started on this path of where you're heading now with this new coaching business and sort of doing what you feel like is your purpose and your calling. So, but I wanted to get a bit of an idea of sort of what your life was like before that. So what was your career at that time? What was your life like? And what were some things that were going on back then before all this?
In 2014, to be exact, was when I quit my corporate job. So you definitely touched on the right year. And that was when everything began to change for me. Life pretty much looked like very unhappy in the job. I had just hired a coach, and I was beginning to very much change my environment as far as becoming well versed in personal development and workshops, because I knew that something had to change. So that 2014 was like the very tail end of what I considered me being on the cusp. And I began my coaching certification in August of that year. So in a nutshell, that was a very transitory year for me, because in February I was done and I quit. And then I started getting certified a couple of months later, and I actually began coaching halfway into my certification. I didn't even wait until I graduated.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So what was your life like before that? So what was your career and sort of how were you living at that time before you started doing coaching and all that?
My life was very unfulfilling. I suffered from what I knew right away was depression when I was 21. So that was in 2009 when that began. And I was in my senior year of college. I was actually majoring in psychology and communications. So I was very well aware of myself and my mind and the way that it was functioning and everything around me. And I knew that I was falling very deeply into a depression, which now I can attribute to not knowing my identity and who I was, and sort of having these expectations that were laid out for me. And I had an issue, very big issue with having to live my life in that way. And so because I chose not to, it was kind of like that battle, that inner conflict that I was struggling with, that eventually led to me becoming very depressed, and that lasted for about 2 years. In that depression was when I developed the eating disorder, which was binge eating disorder, because essentially the only thing that I used to make me happy was food. And that's what I turned to. That's the only thing that made me feel good. And I, again, in that time, I wasn't so much registering that I did this because of this, because of this, because of this, but I knew that that's the only thing that almost brought me pleasure, that it was almost like I can rely on, I can count on. I can count on food to make me happy. I can count on food to fill that void. And so that ended up making the depression worse. So I essentially gained about 40 pounds. And yeah, it was, a very interesting time that I don't look back on it and think, oh my God, that was like the worst time of my life. I look at it now as like, I'm so grateful that that happened, because it did essentially put me in a position like where I'm at today, where I now can help people with this, because I know how that mind works, the depressed mind and the unfulfilled mind and the purposeless type of mind. And it really helps me have empathy, which I consider to be one of the biggest tools for success. So yeah, a lot of things happen in those 2 years. I'm condensing it.
Mm.
Um, After I got out of the depression was when I entered the corporate world, because I could barely work when I was
Mm.
depressed. It happened my last year of college, so I took a year off. I took a year off. And it was because I couldn't function. And then eventually after that year, I started to, apply for jobs, and I ended up working in marketing and PR, which was the communications component of my degree. And I always knew that I didn't want to be a psychologist, even though that's what always fascinated me, which is why I also chose that as my other um, major. I double majored. And so um, the human mind fascinated me, and it selfishly, it fascinated me because of what I went through, because I
Mm.
wanted to understand why that happened to me. And I wanted to understand why that happens to people. And I wanted to know exactly why 1 + 1 = 2 when it came to
Mm.
that. It's just something that I became hungry to figure out what happened and what I now can do to help people
Mhm.
do something about their current life situation. And it doesn't have to lead to depression. And what
Mm.
I realized was that what was missing was this emotional intelligence that they don't teach us in schools, and learning how to deal with your emotions and manage your emotions, and the fact that there's there's your intelligence, your IQ, which is what the school system is so fixated on, and then there's your EQ, your emotional intelligence, which I had no idea what that was. And essentially,
Mm.
I can sit here and be like, I wish that I knew back then what I know now. Um, but I didn't. And now that I
Mm.
do, it's kind of like that Maya Angelou quote that says, I did then what I knew how to do, but now that I know better, I do better. So
Mm.
this is me doing better by essentially paying it forward and giving people that which I didn't have back then.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're in this corporate career doing your marketing work and you're
Mhm.
unfulfilled. I was curious, how was it a gradual transition where you sort of started to, sounds like you were curious about how your mind was working and how the mind works and all this EQ stuff. Was it just gradually over time you started to discover this isn't the path I want to go down, or was there any like sudden change that suddenly sparked it, or how did that work exactly?
I would say it was a combination of both. And the reason for that is because it began gradual, where I started to see and feel that, all right, this job doesn't serve me. Why am I here? And then I would quit jobs left and right. So, as far as gradual, that's how it was gradual, because I
Mm.
still hadn't learned the lesson. I just kept going from one bad situation to another, not knowing that it was a bad situation, but it would eventually turn into one. And then, um, as far as certain things happening, there were certain, I guess, not milestones, but like just certain moments that there were like epiphanies that I had in that time in my life. One of them being my coach that I hired during that time of corporate had his 40th birthday party, and he invited me to that birthday party. And there I was able to meet a bunch of his other clients and a lot of family and personal friends. And my boyfriend at the time, not Rob, someone else, he was with me, and he knew, obviously what I was going through. I was like kind of like at a fork in the road, not knowing what I was going to do. And he's like, man, you have to meet this lady. And he pointed at her, and I'm like, okay, who is she? And he said to me, she's doing exactly what I know you would want to be doing.
Mm.
And so I thought to myself, what is he even talking about? Because I don't even know what I want to be doing.
Mhm.
But essentially it was coaching, and I was at a point where I knew that life coaching was introduced to me as an option to get certified to be a life coach, but it was very vague for me, meaning it felt like something was missing. And so when I went up to this woman and she told me about IIN, which is the program I got certified through, and what you become trained in, and the fact that it was 1 year and all the stuff there and what she was doing now, I was like blown. I call it a moment where the Red Sea parted because that's essentially what it felt like for me. And so that's another reason why it was also a combination of both gradual and sudden, because it was in
Mm,
that moment where I knew I had to take massive action, because I'm like, this thing I've been looking for actually does exist.
yeah,
And that's what I'm going to do.
that's cool. I
Hmm.
like that. What talking about having a coach for yourself, I think that's something I'm curious about as well, because you being a coach now, obviously, I know you're an advocate that everyone should have a coach, and it kind of makes sense because you've seen the transformation it can have, and for yourself and for the clients that you coach now. But what gave you the foresight back then to actually hire a coach for yourself? Like, because a lot of people, I think, maybe stubborn might not be the right word, but like they think they can figure it out all on their own. They think they don't need guidance from people. So how did you actually make the decision to get a coach for yourself back then?
So stubborn is the right word because I do encounter a lot of that often. I made the decision because I was at my wit's end. And I knew that if I did not like my reality, I had to address the choices that I was making, which created my reality. And so when I looked at it like that, I was like, okay, I don't like my reality, and these are the choices I'm making. I have to begin to make different choices. So I just happened to start like feeding my mind and my soul with events and workshops that had to do with finding purpose and just, personal development. And I just started to become this sponge until eventually I came across the right fit for a coach, and the fact that that even existed as as a resource, because that's something else too. People come to me all the time in awe that they didn't know that what I do exists as a resource. Like the fact that I actually, not just that I'm a coach, but I coach in what I coach in. So they're
Mm,
like, I wish, my therapist would have told me about you, or my
mm,
trainer, or my doctor, or my this, or my that, And so a lot of what I do is not just, it's not just for the sell. That's like the last thing. It's for exposure. It's for people to know that this is a beautiful option to help solve the problem that you have, and that this does exist to you as a resource, and it's very accessible to you. So in that moment when I met my coach, it was like that was the option and the new choice that I had to make. And I was jumping in like blindly because I didn't know what to expect. I just knew that because I heard him speak, and I didn't even care about his credentials. I heard him speak, and I heard what he had to offer, and just his presence and his energy. I was like, I knew I had to work with him.
mm,
And whatever happened out of that, I was at that point where I was like, I have nothing to lose right now.
mm.
So that's how I made the choice. I looked at it as the choices that I wasn't making weren't the best, that I was making weren't the best ones, and I had to make a different choice in this direction.
Mm, that's cool. I
Yeah.
like that. So you quit your corporate career. That was it was 2014, and you've kind of got this new direction you want to take your life down. You've got
Hmm.
the help of your coach, but from what I've researched on you, it doesn't sound like that was a particularly smooth transition. So could you tell me about the first few years after you quit your job and sort of went down this new path? And I'd like to particularly hear the story about Christmas time for you. So could you maybe talk about that for a little bit, this sort of those few years?
So, do you mean by Christmas time, like me affording gifts for people and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So, um, I, for myself, it wasn't a smooth transition, but when a lot of entrepreneurs look at my beginning, they're like, "Wow, you had it pretty good." So that could be very subjective. So since for me it did not feel very smooth, that's the space I will talk to you
Hmm.
from. So when I actually started out my coaching career, that I had already graduated. I just ended a relationship with the guy that I was with, who I was with for 2.5 years, and that was the person that I thought I was going to marry. And it was like going through a breakup, having just quit a job, not making any money, starting a business from scratch. When I graduated, I had 2 clients under my belt. I had nothing, absolutely nothing. And I had to wake up every single day and force myself to create, to create, to create, to create. So that first Christmas, that was probably in the spring. So that Christmas, it probably had been about 6 months since I had began coaching. I had maybe like 5 or 6 clients. And I remember being like, wow, I don't really think that I can get everyone something, because I was like, I can get some people something, some people may not get. So I just decided to not give anyone anything, because then it just, wouldn't be fair. And I remember saying to myself, this will be the last time that I ever experience this, like ever again. It'll never happen. And
Mm.
so I would say that quote unquote not so smooth transition lasted for about 6 months, because eventually the business did grow.
Mm.
And I just stuck with what I knew, and I stuck with what I had learned. And I took very, very much advantage of all of my relationships and my resources, which is essentially what I always tell people to do when they feel stuck. It's about who you know, who you can talk to, who knows this person that may know that person that may have a connection to this person. And that is how you build a business.
Mm. That's cool.
So, yeah.
Could you maybe unpack that a little bit more in context of your own business? So,
Sure,
like,
sure.
how did you get your first few clients, and then how did you
Mhm.
grow it from there?
So my first 2 clients that I acquired were people that I already knew. So that's typically how things start. And so they put, their faith in me as being able to treat them as somebody that has to pretend to not know them, and just to kind of help them with certain things. It's kind of like take the friend hat off and put the
Mm.
coaching hat on. And then those 2 clients ended up referring people to me. And then, so I had that already beginning to kind of come together. And then on the other side of it, I said to myself, okay, what I need to do right now is get on my social media. So I remember I opened my Facebook and I went through my entire friends list, which back then was about like 1,000 something people. And I started writing down the names of people that obviously knew me and that I felt would be open to having a complimentary session with me.
Mm.
So I wrote up this little script that, it didn't sound cheesy or phony or anything, and I just made it sound like myself. And I approached them from the place of, hey, as you may have become aware on social media lately, I just started my private health coaching practice, and I'm acquiring, which I needed a lot of data and research to know how I was going to go about this.
Mm.
I'm conducting these sessions to gather some feedback and data to help make the business better. And so, is it okay if I just send you this form? And I would send them like a little form that I had so that they can fill it out. And then I would ask them, once they're done with the form, if they would be more than willing to meet with me at either a coffee shop or a park or anywhere to kind of go over the form, so I
Mhm.
can ask them about the stuff in question. And I will say that from everyone that I reached out to, which was over the span of a few months, I'm going to say about 70 to 80% of people accepted, because
Mm.
they knew that I'm not like trying to like gyp them in. Like, these are people that I knew. They weren't strangers.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, they were just acquaintances. They were just people that I went to college with or high school with and so forth. So it was a little awkward still, even though we did know each other, because we still kind of didn't. But then out of those 70 to 80% that did say yes to me, in that session, I told them what I was doing and how my program worked and what I was intending to do, I would say about 50% became interested and signed up.
It's awesome.
And that is how I little by little started to build the business. So I remember from 1 month to another month, I went from about 5 clients, it wasn't 6 yet, to 13.
Hmm.
And
It's
that
amazing.
was it was in my first year of coaching.
It's amazing.
So, and that's how it happens. And then people start to talk about you, and then you eventually just start to build the business.
Yeah, makes sense. I think it's an important point as well, because a lot of people, whether it's a coaching business or they're just starting a product business or whatever, people think they need to find out all these ways to like build these funnels and sell to all these people
Mm-hmm.
who they don't even know and get all this cold traffic and convert it. But it does make sense to start with your network, even if you're not like a super connected person. Everyone knows like a lot of people when you actually lay it out. And then, as you said, they already trust you, they already know you.
Exactly.
And then you can just sort of grow it from there. So I think it's a good
It's the best
takeaway.
way to start. It's the best way to start for sure. When I coach a lot of coaches in the making or entrepreneurs, and I tell them, start with what you know and start with who you know.
Mm.
And the rest will take care of itself. I promise.
I love it. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
So can you maybe just explain, if you can, just exactly how you help your clients? So what are the sort of problems that people are coming to you with, and how do you help them solve them, essentially?
The number one problem that people come to me for is I am stuck.
Mm.
So I am stuck in whether it's a career, a job, a certain relationship, a marriage, stuck with their weight, stuck in a
Mm.
problem. They're experiencing some sort of stuckness. And the way that I help them is through first teaching them about emotional intelligence and how that pertains to their integrative health. So I guess the model that I use is looking at it as you come to me, and this is just in more professional terms, because you're experiencing some sort of imbalance in your primary foods. Your primary foods are not foods you eat, rather, they're your relationships, your career, your physical activity, and your spirituality. So the idea is that if you're experiencing some sort of imbalance in one, two, or all of them, that imbalance in and of itself may also be affecting your secondary food, which is now your actual food that you eat, your
Mm.
actual nutrition. So then that's how we end up talking about actual nutrition. For some people, actually, for most people, we don't really talk too much about food because that's why it's called secondary food. I refer to it
Mm.
as secondary food. Primary food is a lot more important. It's the soul food. And essentially being able to balance those four areas out is what I believe is like the picture of health, because now once you have balance in all four areas, you're able to perform at a peak level. And the
Mm.
way that I help bring the balance is through teaching them about emotional intelligence. And then I provide them with tools and strategies on how to build their emotional agility to bring back the balance in all four of those areas.
Mm. I love it. And that's so important. I think starting with the fundamental, this like starting with the foundation. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people will have all these techniques or tricks or whatever to try and fix problems, but they never get to like the root cause, which is, as you
Exactly.
said, oftentimes the career, the relationships. They're the things that then compile into everything else, essentially. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that you start with that. That's great. What's and so I can imagine as well, because you went through struggles of your own, and as you said before, that gives you empathy. And so you even said it before, you're sort of grateful for all those things you went through, because I can imagine that would really help you connect with clients, because you've been there,
Mm-hmm.
you've sort of been in their situation, and then you're able to help them get through it, really, same as you did. So
Absolutely. You said it. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's because I know that feeling you have, that thought you're having, that craving you're having, that sadness you're feeling, I understand it. I really, really understand you. And I have found that that is what most people desire, to be understood. It's very profound
Mm.
when the person sitting across from you can actually look at you and talk to you and speak to you in a way where you feel understood.
Yeah.
And that's where you're able to have like the most power and be that much more effective with a client, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% believe that.
Hmm.
What's the biggest transformation you've seen from a client, or maybe not the biggest, but just one of the ones that stands out as like a really big transformation that someone you've helped, where they've gone from and to?
That's tough because it's happened with so many of them. I can actually share with you something that did happen with someone who actually wasn't a client, and then I can share something with an actual client. But something that was that was like a shock factor was this woman that came to one of my workshops. Now I am in Miami, and the workshop was in Miami, and this woman drove from Tampa. Tampa is about 5 hours north of Miami in Florida. It's kind of like where Disney World is, around that area.
Mm. Mm.
So it's about a 5 hour drive. And she came to one of my workshops on a Saturday morning. And she was like, she sat at the front, and, it was a great time. She got so much from it. I met her afterwards. We connected. And she ended up writing me the next day. And she said to me, I quit my job. And I'm like, what? And she actually shared with the audience that day how, that's something that she felt that she had to quote unquote declutter from. I taught in the workshop how to appropriately declutter from your life. And that's exactly what she did. She quit her job and
Mm.
was like, I'm just committed to figuring it out. And so I know that I'll figure it out, because now that you gave me these tools, like I had the confidence, just like you had the confidence when you quit your job and you did what you had to do. If you did it, I can do it too. So that's an example of a non-client that had an amazing transformation. I've had clients that they I know the transformation is there, not just because they tell me, but because I'm interacting with them, and their
Mm.
language is totally different. The
Mm.
way that they handle situations, I'm like, who is this person? You know what I mean? So it's like I can actually see it play out in front of me all the time. Um,
Mm.
I was able to successfully, and I know it may sound ironic, but I was able to successfully help a couple come to an agreement to get divorced, because that
Mm.
was the best thing for both of them.
Mhm.
I coach them individually because I don't coach couples, but I did the work with both of them. And then eventually at the end, I brought them together in a joint session, and we were able to agree that that was the best thing to do. And it finally happened, and they both couldn't be happier.
Mm. That's
And then
awesome.
I think the last one that I actually want to bring up, like it popped up the moment you asked me, but I wanted to share these two, was actually a text message that I got yesterday from a former client of mine who was with me for about a year. And it was one text, one little paragraph. And if you're okay with that, I would love to share it with your
Mm.
audience.
Please.
Okay. So she was actually my client, one of my very first clients in that first year of coaching that I was talking about.
Mhm.
And she said to me, hey, Angie, I want to thank you for coaching me. I want to thank you for coaching me. Yesterday, a coworker of mine went into cardiac arrest during a meeting, and it was legit one of the scariest experiences of my life. The skills and mindset shifts I learned from you have really helped me the past 2 days, and it has helped me personally and helped me to help others as well, especially yesterday. When everything went down yesterday, I did not panic. I got into response mode and was able to be helpful. The old me would have absolutely crumbled. Please send lots of positive vibes, energy, and prayers. Thank you times a million. I love you.
Hmm. That's powerful.
That was I'm still processing that because it was sent to me yesterday and I was just like blown by that. Like you just can't make that shit up.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
So that's
That's why you do it. Yeah.
yeah, that's another example of transformation.
That's cool. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah.
Do you, so you're a coach. Do you have a coach as a coach? Have you got someone
Yes,
who
I
still coaches you?
I am still with the same coach that I hired 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And people from the outside that look in see me thriving and, doing well and in a good space. And they're like, why do you have a coach? They're often very confused by it. Like, why would you need a coach? And I'm like, it's because of my coach. I mean, not 100% because of him, but it's because of my consistency with my growth and my personal development that I'm able to be at the level that I'm at today and be on my A game. Because here's what happens and what people don't understand. They think that when you are struggling and are at rock bottom, that that's the only criteria for hiring a coach. And that could not be any more further from the truth. The what I like to talk about is if you're actually doing well and you're in a really good place and you just want to take things up a notch, that's actually a great moment and a great opportunity to hire a coach. So
Mm.
I also was going to say that now I have a second coach. I just hired a second coach um, for business. She's just a business coach, and
Mm.
it's gotten to the point where my business has done so well that it's time to scale. And so now that I have that necessity, I go and I hire a business coach. So you don't have to be in a deep dark place to hire a coach. You can
Yeah.
actually be in a very good place and just you would have the need to level up a little bit, and that's enough of a criteria to work with a coach.
Mm.
So I have two
Makes
coaches right now.
makes total sense. I
Yeah.
think it's funny because a lot of people get it if you talk about like athletes. They'll because like elite athletes have like 10 coaches. They've got one for
Mm-hmm.
every like different area of their sport, and people get that because just because you're at the elite level doesn't mean you're going to stay there. You need to always be improving and learning.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, when people look at just life in general or business or whatever, they don't see it the same way. So yeah, I totally get
Yeah.
why you still have one for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, One thing I was really curious about that you actually wrote in the pre-interview that I sent you was
Mm.
talking about how you managed to basically start making the kind of money that you wanted to make, and the way you're able to do that was by destroying your money story. So I was wondering, could you just unpack that a little bit? Like, what does that mean exactly? And yeah, maybe just unpack it a bit.
Hell yeah, I would love to unpack that because that typically stirs up a lot of controversy.
I love it.
A lot of people have an issue talking about money and makes them uncomfortable. And I'm sure you've seen this before. And I used to be one of these people. So I have what's the best way to say it? I don't want to call myself an expert, but I'm pretty good at breaking down people's money stories that don't serve them because we all have a money story. It's just whether that story is a story that serves you or it steals from you. So the way that I was able to break down my money story actually goes back to around that time where I began first working. And after my depression, and I was in my first corporate job, and I was with that boyfriend. He called me out one day when I had made a purchase online. I believe yeah, it happened online, and my account got overdrafted
Mm.
because what I had purchased got charged twice instead of one time. And I remember that happened and I was so upset and I said to myself, why does this always happen to me? And he
Mhm.
heard me and he looked at me and he's like, you sound exactly like your mother.
Mhm.
And I looked at him and I'm like, why would you say that? He's like, because the same things happen to your mother. It's always something with finances. It's always something with money, and everything is too tight and everything is too expensive and there's never enough. And it's like, you're going to turn out to be exactly like her. And I looked at him and I was so upset that he said that. Like, he really, really triggered me.
Mm.
And the reason I was upset was because he was right.
Mm.
And so, what I like to say about money stories is that it comes from the way we were raised. And our money stories are essentially our parents' money stories and our family's money stories. It's what we grew up in. So,
Mm.
my family, they're from Cuba. Half of them are from Cuba, half of them are from Colombia. My father's side is Colombian. And so they were immigrants to the United States. And so when they got to this country, they had to start from scratch. They essentially had to um, work like freaking horses to make ends meet, blood, sweat, tears, labor.
Mm.
And so to them, they think of money as that being the process for everyone. You have to kill yourself for it. You have to, suffer. You have to work hard. You have to, save all your money and scarcity mindset. And we can't buy these things because they're so expensive, and we can't travel and go out to eat because money is so scarce. And we had to work really hard for it. Um, and I remember that as I started to really see that play out in my life, it was almost like a slap in the face where I'm like, holy shit, I'm exactly like my family. And I look at money the same way that they do. And then it wasn't till I started in those first 6 months of coaching that I started to acquire the clients and basically create opportunities for me. And those opportunities were opportunities where I got paid. I started to realize that, wow, money is not earned, it's created. Like, I can create
Mm.
money for me at any moment at all. If right now, let's just say hypothetically, I were to be struggling for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe I had a bad 3 months or something, which hasn't happened, knock on wood. But let's just say that that were the case. Right now, I have the ability, just like you, to create. I can get some notes. I can draft up an outline for a workshop on a certain topic. I can create a ticket page for it. I can go find a venue somewhere, pay them a price for it and start to promote it, and then make $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, whatever, based on that. And I
Mm.
just created four figures for myself.
Mm.
So that is what I mean by people's money stories. When people sit in front of me in a consultation, this doesn't happen to me anymore for the most part. Maybe like there's always that one person, but um, in the beginning when I wasn't attracting my ideal client. Like, I didn't have my avatar. It was pretty much like I had different types of people approaching me for coaching, and a lot of them, would hear my pricing and they'd be like, oh my God, that's so expensive and this and that. And in reality, I the way I break down people's money stories is by helping them. I use that moment in the consultation as a coaching moment where I help
Mm.
them realize that the ultimate resource in the world is resourcefulness.
Mm.
So all you have to do is think about a way that you can create money. Who do you need to talk to? Who do you know? What can you sell? I mean, I've had clients that, not because I asked them, but because they realize the value of what I have to offer, because I don't get paid for my time. I get paid for my value.
Mm.
They, on their own, have Ubered besides their regular job to be able to pay me monthly. I
Mm.
had a client sign up with me 2 years ago who, the day before she met with me for the consultation, she had declared bankruptcy
Mm.
and she was a single mom. Now, if she signs up for coaching, anybody can sign up for coaching. And it's just a matter of how badly do you want it? Are you committed or are you just interested? Because if you're
Mm.
interested, I will not take you on. And it's very easy to decipher between people who are committed and people who are just interested. That woman was committed, and all she had to do was have a conversation with a friend, not even a family member, because she had no one in her family to lend her the money, with a friend who gave her the money and said, you can pay me back whenever you want. I know that you need this for yourself. And
Mm.
so essentially that was my money story. Then that's my money story now. And that's how I help clients break down their money stories.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big mindset shift to go from like expecting to be paid for value rather than time or
And
effort.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's an important mindset shift to have. So I love that you help people do that.
Yeah, thank you.
So you do a lot of speaking and events now. And so I'm curious, were you always a natural public speaker? Is that something that you were born with?
No way. It's funny because if you would have asked me more than 5 years ago, even up to 5 years ago, if I would have been speaking, I would have probably started crying because it used to be my biggest fear.
Mm.
Like it was downright. I had two fears in life. One of them was flying. I don't like flying, and I still don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and public speaking. And I remember when I was in college, I had to take the class as part of my prereqs for my degree and my major. And I waited to the last possible second, the last semester of my senior year, to take that class because I was dreading it.
Mm.
And that class had about 30 people in it, and everyone there felt the same way I did. So that made me
Mm.
feel better.
Mm.
But I had to go up and give 6 speeches in a couple months.
Mm.
And it wasn't just the fact that I overcame the fear, it was the fact that in overcoming the fear, I discovered that it was a strength.
Mm.
So I was like receiving all this feedback and all this praise for it that I was like, wow, like I have to use this to my advantage. And so I mean, I still get nervous like the first 30 seconds, but then after
Mm-hmm.
that, I just kind of tap into the flow, and it just kind of becomes a dialogue and a conversation that I have with my audience because
Mm-hmm.
I'm less concerned with how I sound and how I look and whether I'm sweating or people make speeches and public speaking about themselves, and it has
Mm.
nothing to do with them. It has to do with the people that they're serving. So when you make it about
Mm.
the message, you're not in your head thinking about, oh, are my pits sweating, or is this my hair, or do I sound weird? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So no, I never saw myself as it because of the fact that it was such a fear, and now it's something that I love to do.
Mm. It's cool.
Hmm.
Was it just a case of the more you do it, the better you get, or was there any specific sort of techniques or things you use to get better at it? What are your thoughts there?
For me, what I just said right there was something my public speaking teacher shared with us about how to kill the nerves a little bit by being less in your head about
Yeah.
you. So that tip helped me right off the
Mm.
bat because
Mm-hmm.
now when I want to get nervous, I think about that, and it just calms everything down.
Mm.
And then the more I did it, the more I realized that I actually enjoyed it.
Mm.
So the more I actually realized that it was like a strength. And so for me, and with that context, it did help me the more I did it because I was essentially doing something that I realized that I enjoyed.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill I want to develop, and I think it's an important skill.
Oh, I'll
And
be more than happy to help you.
oh, there you go. Yeah, maybe we can talk about that after. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like super valuable skill. I could definitely see it being useful, especially in
Right.
your line of work as well. So um, curious, just want to be mindful of the time here, but maybe quickly, because I like your thoughts from what I've interacted, well, researched on you. You kind of got some interesting thoughts on education. So I was wondering,
Yeah.
you went to college, yeah?
Hmm.
And are you glad you went?
No.
And why not?
um, I don't want to say that it was a waste of time because it somehow played a role into where I'm at today,
Hmm.
but it was a waste of money, a lot of money.
Hmm.
And I don't believe that it was and is necessary for everyone. And I
Hmm.
think that that's something that I'm not, my intention is not to open a can of worms with this, but I think that society, and I don't know how it is in Australia, but I can speak for the United States where, you know, we're kind of brainwashed into thinking that the way of the American dream. And in reality, no, you don't have to go to college. Education is important for sure. I think more in the sense of personal development. So I think that it is crucial that after high school, you explore what does light you up instead of being forced into something that you have to pick a degree from and be like, that's what I think sounds pretty and I'm going to do that. And then once you explore and find what that is, then maybe you can go to school for that or take courses on that or get certified in that or and so forth. I think that just the way it's laid out today is not something that I vibe well with. And so I almost feel that what I offer today as far as my program and my coaching is the education that you never got in school that I feel was necessary.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And that's more of like, I guess, the EQ side and the
yes, absolutely.
things you
I
miss
think
out on.
it's so important. So important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because school's one of those things that's, yeah, you don't want to say it's like a waste of time, but
Right.
there's so many things that you learn that you never use and things that are crucial that you don't learn. And it kind of, like from personal experience, like everything I learned in high school and university or college here, like none of it is particularly useful to what I do now. And I think
Yeah.
there's still obviously some value in having like a higher education degree, but how much that value is worth is questionable, I think.
Yeah.
And you need to kind of, as you said, personal development, self-education, educating
Mm-hmm.
yourself. A lot of people, I think, they just outsource their education to someone else, if it's like a college or whatever, and they don't do any work on themselves on the EQ side or anything like that. And that's just I don't think that's a good place to be. So, yeah.
100%. If you are not a person who can sit there and say, I know what emotional intelligence is, I have built my emotional agility to a place where it's gotten me here and there, then you're missing some stuff. I mean, emotional agility is knowing how to have relationships with people. It's
Mm,
becoming aware of your feelings and your emotions as well as the feelings and emotions of others and then using them to guide your actions, your thoughts, and your behaviors. And it's essentially you being responsible for your feelings and then how you show up for other people. If you don't know how to do that, you're going to have a hard time in life. And they don't
yep.
teach us that in school.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Yeah.
So, what would you recommend if maybe not even instead of going to college, but for someone who maybe they are at college or they decide that it's not for them, but they just want to
Mm-hmm.
improve their self-education, their EQ? Is there anything specific you'd recommend for people to help with that?
So I'm not ruling out college. I just do think that I'm more of an advocate of like not having to do it right after high school or whatever you
Mm,
choose to do. It doesn't have to be right after. I believe in maybe hiring a coach
mm,
or there's resources like Mind Valley, for example. And Mind Valley has all these different courses and things like that in certain areas where you kind of just start to dabble a little bit in the things that pique your interest. I always say if you're ever lost or stuck, start with what you know, right?
mm,
So those things aren't random if you're attracted to them.
mm,
So start to kind of dabble into some of those things. And,
mm,
maybe you come across like a coach who coaches in that, or there's this course in this and that. And then once you do that, then you'll have more clarity as to
mm.
what to do next.
Yeah.
So I think that just making sure that you're accessing or just becoming aware, doing the research to become
Mm,
aware of what is accessible to me as a resource
mm.
instead
And it's
of
sort
being
of,
like college is the answer.
yes. And it's almost like just following your curiosity. Like you might not see a part, like a career from Mind Valley, for example, but
Mhm.
if it's something you're interested in and curious about, experiment, like dip your toes in there. If you like it, keep going.
Yeah,
If you find something else, you can pivot. And that's what it is really. It's almost like a process of elimination. Like there's not that one course that's going to be everything you
of
need. It's
course.
get a bit from here and there and sort of adjust courses
Yeah.
as you move forward.
And something else is too the way that they're prepping kids today. Um, there are kids now that I'm seeing as they leave high school that they're kind of more confident with the path that they want to take. Like there's some examples where I hear about their experience with education where I'm like, wow, I wish I had that when I was in high school. Where if you're able to prep these students correctly and teach them about EQ and teach them about a bunch of other things, then maybe when they graduate high school, they'll graduate in a position where they feel that they know what path they want to take instead of having to feel so lost.
Yeah.
So I feel like that would make a difference as well, which is why I'm such a strong advocate of emotional intelligence courses that they're being offered in many colleges today, but I don't see them in high school and in middle school and even elementary school. So I think that that's very important.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Well, I want to be mindful of your time, so I've just got a few more quick questions for you
Go
here to
for
wrap
it.
things
Yeah.
up. But
It's okay if we go over just a few minutes. It's no
okay,
big deal.
fantastic. So, what's coming up for you next, Angie? What's your 2019 like? Any big plans from this year?
Yes. So Rob and I actually just got back from the Grant Cardone 10X conference. So we are on fire, creating, building. That was one of the things we were looking forward to this year. And now that that's over, he right now he's doing his stuff with Think. As far as me, I haven't March 16th. I don't know how long that is. In 3-4 weeks, I have an emotional management workshop coming up in Miami. And it's the third one that I do of that particular topic. I'm bringing it back by popular demand, but I'm fine tuning it. So it's going to be a lot of stuff that I haven't done before. So that's coming up in March. And then I'm in the process right now of working with my business coach and scaling my business. So my hope is that by the summer, I will have, whether it be a course or something that I'm going to be offering around the topic as well. I don't know what that will look like yet, but my hope is to have it by the summer. And then I would say my first half of 2019 is kind of planned out. And I don't know what will happen for the second half, but my intention this year is to become a lot more vocal and a lot more intentional with exposing this need for emotional agility. And so if I can be on more interviews and podcasts like this and get on the stage a lot more, that's something that I'm definitely going to be going for, at least for the latter half of 2019. So more workshops, more speaking gigs, more seminars, more retreats, and things like that.
Great. Sounds like a packed year.
Oh, yeah.
Well, is there anything I haven't asked you or anything you do want to make sure you share with the audience before we finish up here?
You know what? No, you did a very good job. I told you that document that you sent me was like on point. You really nailed it. I mean, I guess the only thing that you haven't touched upon is because a lot of people ask me all the time. It's like the first thing they ask me about my relationship with Rob.
Yes, that
So if you
was a section, but I think we probably need another hour for that to get through all that.
Yeah, no, I
But,
mean, you can ask me anything you want about that. But that's really the only thing I could think of that we didn't touch upon. But other than that, you asked me the right questions, and I was so happy to be able to talk about these things because more platforms have to exist for it, and if they don't, you have to create them.
absolutely, I appreciate
Yeah,
the kind words,
yeah,
and I do like to be prepared, so I appreciate
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And maybe perhaps maybe we could do, for the people listening, the Rob that Angie's referring to is Rob Reynoso, who's her partner, and I interviewed Rob probably about a month ago, so you can listen to that interview as well, and that was extremely fascinating.
That
So
interview was amazing.
yeah, so go
Yeah.
listen to that if you haven't. And then maybe for the relationship side of things, maybe we could get both of you on here at some point.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
So watch this space. We'll be
Yeah.
back with that in the future. But
Awesome. Awesome.
last question is just what's the best way for people to connect with you, Angie, if they want to say hello and thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom? How can people do that?
So the two best ways are through my website, which is www.angiesanchez.life. That's LIFE. So that's my direct website where if you're interested in anything or you want to ask me any questions, I have like a little box with a form that you can fill out, or through Instagram. I'm way more active on Instagram than I am on any other social media platform. So my handle on Instagram is at I am Angie Sanchez.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that we link them up in the show notes. But
Perfect.
yeah, that was fantastic, Angie.
That
So
was
thank you
so
so
much
much.
fun. Thank you,
Yeah,
James. I appreciate you.
yeah, I appreciate you as well. And thanks for coming on
Yeah.
the show. And thanks everyone for listening. And hope you have a great day. And we'll speak soon.